Hello, my name is Mary Ann Rockwell. I'm a librarian at Saratoga Springs Public Library, and this is Poets Talk Poetry, where I invite a poet to read a poem by someone they admire and then read their own poem. Today, I'm very pleased to have Barbara Ungar on the webcast, and she's going to read W.S. Merwin's poem, For a Coming Extinction, from his 1967 book, The Lice. And then she's going to read her own poem, Wait, from her chapbook Edge by Ethel Press. A little more about Barbara. Barbara Ungar's most recent book is Edge, as I said, there it is, and which stands for Evolutionary, Distinct, and Globally Endangered Species. This hand-sewn limited edition chapbook was published in March by Ethel Press. Her fifth full-length collection, Save Our Ship, was named to Kirkus Review's Best Books of 2019. It won the Richard Snyder Memorial Prize from Ashland Poetry Press, a Benjamin Franklin Award from the IBPA, and was a distinguished favorite at the IPA. Prior books include Immortal Medusa, there it is, named to Kirkus Review's Best Books of 2015, and Charlotte Bronte, You Ruined My Life. And we have both of those books, I know, at the library for you to check out, and including Save Our Ship, and The Origin of the Milky Way, which won the Guyville Prize and a Silver Independent Publishers Book Award. Barbara is a professor at the College of St. Rose in Albany, New York, and she lives in Saratoga Springs. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you.
And I invite you to just jump in and read Merwin's poem, For a Coming Extinction.
Thank you. For a Coming Extinction. Gray whale, now that we are sending you to the end, that great God, tell him that we who follow you invented forgiveness and forgive nothing. I write as though you could understand and I could say it. One must always pretend something among the dying. When you have left the seas nodding on their stalks, empty of you, tell him that we were made on another day. The bewilderment will diminish like an echo winding along your inner mountains, unheard by us, and find its way out, leaving behind it the future, dead and ours. When you will not see again the whale calves trying the light. Consider what you will find in the black garden and its court. The sea cows, the great auks, the gorillas, the irreplaceable hosts ranged countless and foreordaining as stars, our sacrifices. Join your word to theirs. Tell him that it is we who are important.
This is a gorgeous poem and a sad poem, and I'm amazed somehow that it was written in 1967 because it speaks to the way our world is facing impending extinction. This is based on scientific facts that we were aware of at that era. And it's become ever more so now. Could you talk a little about the poem, Barbara?
Well, I love this poem. I wish I wrote it. I admire it greatly. I think of all the eco poems that I know, this one expresses most successfully this incredible sadness of all of these, as he calls them, irreplaceable hosts. that we are dooming to extinction. It's estimated that it's something like 100 to 200 species a day now. The rate is either 1,000 to 10,000 times what it would be naturally. And a few years ago, I was on sabbatical, and I read The Sixth Extinction by Elizabeth Colbert, and I read The Uninhabitable Earth by David Wallace Wells, and it really galvanized me. And I haven't been able to think about much else since, so it's really changed my writing and my teaching. So my last two books have been ecologically themed. Save Our Ship is, the title poem is about rising oceans, and Edge is all about either endangered or extinct species. So it just saddens me incredibly that, yes, we have known this my entire lifetime and more. Scientists have been warning us, and yet for some reason we don't seem to be doing anything about it. So Shelley said that poets were the unacknowledged legislators of the world, and I wish that that were true. If that were true, maybe somebody would have listened to Merwin 50 years ago, but it's not too late. So
it's not too late.
Not too late.
Yeah. So the tone is very interesting in this poem because at times the poet's voice peeks through, I think, but the overall tone is a very cynical one, a very kind of heartless entity that is sending the gray whale to the end, that great God. And as I've heard you point out, the end is in caps, and God is not in caps. So you invented, tell we who follow, you invented forgiveness and forgive nothing. So it's a very cynical voice.
I think of it as being highly ironic. I don't think of it as cynical, and that I don't think that this is Merwin's voice, but that he is projecting a persona that is humanity. But this would be the humanity that doesn't care about animals and nature. And clearly he does, since he devoted the latter part of his life to restoring Hawaiian palm forests and his land there. He was a very devoted environmentalist. So I think of it as being ironic, almost in the like a modest proposal in that vein, where I'm saying the exact opposite of what I actually think. But my students have a very hard time with this poem. They don't understand it. And I think part of it is that it seems simple, but it's actually rhetorically complex, and that he's taking this voice, he's addressing the whale, and talking about God as him, but God is lowercase, him is lowercase. The great God is labeled the end in uppercase. And there are these biblical references. We were made on another day.
Yeah.
We follow you, invented forgiveness and forgive nothing. I love those lines. Animals don't have forgiveness. They don't need forgiveness. We are the ones who need it, but we invented it, but we don't actually.
So we can absolve ourselves.
Right. And then that reference to the garden towards the end, the black garden, as a kind of negative of the Garden of Eden or creation, where the animals end up after they are extinct. And then that ending where it's the speaker, the ironic speaker, talking to the whale, join your word to theirs, all these other extinct animals, tell him, God, that it is we humans who are important. Which I don't think is what Merwin believes at all, but it is the way that we humanity are acting. So I find it a very powerful poem. Maybe other people had trouble with it the way my students do, and didn't really get the message. I don't know.
I think it's very lyrical but explicit too about his concerns about the environment.
One thing that I admire about it so much is that although it has a very strong political message, it's so beautiful. It's so lyrical. It's so sad. It's an elegy. It's an elegy for the great whale and for all these animals.
Yeah. The bewilderment will diminish like an echo winding along your inner mountains, unheard by us. So that to me is a voice of mourning, that bewilderment, that unspeakable echo and echolocution.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because of the word echo, to me, I associate it with echolocation, which is the way whales hear. Um, they bounce, sound bounces off of things, and um, in that big forepart of their heads. So I imagine that winding along your inner mountains, unheard by us, is being the whale's bewilderment, that humans can't hear, but it finds its way out, leaving behind it this future which is dead and ours. So we are creating this horrible future in which all the animals are dead, and it's ours because we've created it. And of course, we are going to follow, which is said very early in the poem. We who follow you.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, so that in that stanza in particular, there are some poignant line breaks that really lend a lot of doubleness, like a lot of multiple meanings to the poem.
yeah,
So leaving behind it the future, and then it could be the future dead and ours and our dead. So we're creating our own demise.
right.
And I mean, the whole poem is just has such wonderful lines and such unexpected imagery. But the contrast of the whales, the whale calves trying the light, so beautiful. You will not, and the whale will not see them again. And so that's so tragic. Contrasted with, consider what you will find in the black garden and its court. And then it alludes to the Great Auks and all the other extinct animals. So, haven't we learned already from what we know, what has happened to animals at our hands?
And apparently we haven't. And that's, I think, the import of the last line, that it is we who are important, that we think only our needs matter, even though it's also suicidal, because if we destroy our own ecosystem, we are next to follow. Paul Ehrlich said, in driving other species to extinction, humanity is busy sawing off the limb on which it perches.
Mm-hmm.
Like a cartoon image, but we are
Mm-hmm.
killing everything else. We are also killing ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
That line about the whale calves is so beautiful when you not see again the whale calves trying the light. And it reminds me in Moby Dick, there's a very beautiful chapter where he gets into the center of a big pod of whales and sees the mother whales nursing their calves. And it's so beautiful. And then it's followed immediately by a scene of incredible slaughter and mayhem, which I think is done on purpose, because what makes us sympathize with animals more than mothers feeding their babies? Yeah, and it also reminds me that whales now, some of the larger whales, their milk has become toxic because they're at the top of the food chain, and we put so much poison in the oceans that when they nurse their young, sometimes the babies die simply because their mother's milk is poisoned. They're full of PCBs and things like that, which is also awful. And another thing that torments me is thinking about the sonic booms that are in the ocean now for the Navy and also for testing for oils. It's just this constant loud noise. I don't know, maybe because I'm a poet, I like quiet, and random noise makes me crazy. And to be a whale and have this very delicate hearing and depend on echolocation and to be constantly bombarded by these noises, it's just ghastly. But it is we who are important. We need our oil, so we're not really thinking about what the whales and their calves need.
So for the things that you've noted that have taken place since this poem was written, there's so much prophecy in it, in Merwin's words here. And to the reference to sacrifices is kind of almost warlike, in that, great whale, we will hold you up as an example and go back and tell him that it is we who are important, almost kind of like an archaic reference. The world was a more martial place than it is, even more so than now, perhaps, in a way.
Yeah, and the irreplaceable hosts also goes along with that kind of military image, the hosts often referring to soldiers in war, and that all these animals are sacrifices because we think that we are so important, but they deserve to die so that we can be comfortable for a short period of time. I love that word irreplaceable because one of the things that makes me so sad is species are going extinct at a rate that's something like 1,000 to 10,000 times what it normal rate would be. I think it's 200 species a day now. Many of them we don't even know what they are. We haven't clocked them yet, and in each form is irreplaceable. So that just saddens me so much. And one book that I really recommend is Half Earth by E.O. Wilson. It's a hopeful one, and he recommends that we simply set aside half the planet and give it to wild creatures. And in that way, we will be saving our own lives. And he's got a plan. So that's a less depressing and more.
Great. Okay. Ending that poem on a happier note.
Trying, yeah.
Yeah. And so now let's hear your own poem, please. You're going to read Wait.
So this poem came from an article called The Biomass Distribution on Earth in the National Academy of Sciences of the U.S. proceedings. And I was just so stunned by these statistics that I tried to make a poem out of it. It's nowhere near as masterly and gorgeous as Merwin's, but for what it's worth, this is Wait. Having measured life on Earth, we're found wanting. Humans, a mere 100th of 100th of the living. Life proves to be mostly trees, only 100th in the 7 seas, 1/8 buried, bacteria. Underground, more than 1,000 times more bacteria than us. Even worms outweigh us, 3 to 1. So does the lowly virus. Yet we have paved the earth with chicken bones. Weep into your soup. Under 1/3 of birds fly free, the rest, poultry. Garden turned feedlot and slaughterhouse. Homo sapiens, 1/3 of all mammals, keep almost 2/3 to eat, mostly cow and pig. Only 4% left for all wild creatures, elephant to mouse. Half Earth's creatures have vanished in the last half-century, while we've redoubled. Even half gone, plants outweigh us, 7,500 to 1. May they survive the plague of us.
So that's beautiful. And I think it is a poem indeed, and it has lyricism and works to educate us as well about our environment and our actions that affect it. You have the tercets and the rhyme scheme. There's kind of a casual rhyme scheme that I like in it very much. And it's just sort of packs in very succinctly these necessary, these things we need to know. So tell us about the poem.
Well, one thing that strikes me coming off of Merwin's poem, that his final line, it's we who are important. One thing that struck me so much about this study is how unimportant we are. We are only 100th of 100th of the living matter on Earth by weight. We're a teeny bit, and yet we have changed the Earth to such an extent. So in the past, since Merwin's poem was written, we have killed off half the animals and half the plant life, which is just shocking. And our numbers have more than doubled, which is a big part of the problem that for some reason people don't talk about anymore. Back in '67, we talked a lot about overpopulation, and it seems to have been become verboten, but it really is the root of the problem. And if we had addressed it then, we wouldn't be in the dire straits that we're in now. I guess what I found most shocking was that the statistic that we're only a third of mammals by weight, and that almost 2/3 were cows and pigs. So that with only 4% left for all wild animals, we tend to think, oh, this animal's endangered, that animal's endangered. It's like, no, all wild creatures are endangered because of our farming practices and because of our insane meat eating habits, which we Americans, I think, have spread around the globe. Everybody now thinks they should have McDonald's every day, which is so sad and so unnecessary. And, goes back to this idea of E.O. Wilson's, which is don't give 2/3 of the earth to cows and pigs, but keep half of it for wild animals, and they will in turn keep us alive. Whereas our sort of monoculture farming will ultimately kill us off. If you read the New York Times Sunday Magazine section, they're predicting a dust bowl even worse than the 20th century dust bowl, the entire center of the United States. So things already are very dire and become worse all the time. The other one about the birds, under a third of birds fly free. Of course, we all love birds, and that over 2/3 are poultry. And if you think about the conditions that chickens are raised in industrial farming, I mean, it's just heartbreaking. So, well, I don't think it's the greatest poem in the world or the greatest poem I've ever written. I found that it's very effective. When I read this to my class this last semester, one boy immediately became a vegetarian.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I've had other people you don't have to become a vegetarian or a vegan, but you could just eat less meat. And if we all ate half the amount of meat, we could have that 2/3 of the planet being given over to cows and pigs, and then there would be a lot more room for wildlife to survive. So it's doable if we could become conscious of what we're doing to the planet. Another thing that strikes me reading it now, it was written pre-coronavirus, so I say worms outweigh us 3-1. So does the lowly virus. I had no idea then that the virus would be outdoing us.
That's a prophetic poem.
Yeah. In the end, may they survive the plague of us. I mean, there was no plague then, although they had obviously been predicted. So, but I am hopeful, and I love the idea that there are 7,500 to 1 plants to us, and that Earth will somehow survive, and nature always propagates, and we are.
And crisis is opportunity. I mean, I'm latching on to that kind of meme right now. That people are becoming awakened to the fact, and there are more and more books, such as by Elizabeth Colbert and Bill McKibben, and so we're becoming more and more aware.
Right.
And poets are taking on the environment. There's a whole poetic movement of eco-poetry, and you have joined that movement. Yay, Barbara. So
thank you. Yeah, well, we're trying, right? As Shelley said, poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. So if people would only listen to us, and maybe we can break through. I mean, scientists have been warning us for decades. And I read something recently where a scientist said, we have all the facts, we have all the data, we've given it to you, but we can't change people's consciousness. So I think that is the role of poets and all artists. And
artists.
That's what I'm working on in my own tiny way. I mean, I don't think that poetry is the greatest way to change mass consciousness, because not that many people read poetry, but it's what I do. So
you changed your student's mind about eating meat. That's
right.
Incredible.
So it's changed my teaching, and it's changed my writing, and hopefully it will lead us all to change our lives. Right?
Yes, very good. All right. Well, please either purchase or check out Barbara's book, Save Our Ship, and her chapbook. Tell me the name of it. The Edge. Yeah. There it is. Okay. Thank you so much, Barbara, for talking with me today.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Great. Same here. Bye.